Hello everyone, welcome to the Trinity Channel. We are a Christian network and we nevertheless accept all challenges from our Muslim friends. So we love to have discussions, we love to have debates. CL and I are both going to be debating this Saturday if you happen to be in the Michigan area to watch this. But CL, why would you go out in public and try to show that Muhammad is not a prophet, which you'll be doing this Saturday?
Well, I'm not doing it to try to offend anyone. I'm not doing it to promote myself. I am doing it.
You're not doing it because you're racist against all non-white people or something like that? Because that's what I get when I do it.
No. That's not the reason.
That's the only reason you could be against Muhammad.
Well, no. There could be other reasons you could be against Muhammad. Okay. I know this may shock some of our Muslim viewers, but it could be that you have looked at the evidence for Muhammad's prophethood in the Quran and the Sunnah, what the Islamic scholars have said, what those who give dawah have said, and you don't believe it. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. It's full of contradictions.
Wait, so your view of Muhammad and your willingness to challenge Islamic views could be based on just facts and evidence?
Yes. It could be based on absolute facts and evidence. And in fact, I would say there is no one, I don't think anyone can sincerely look at all of the facts and evidences and rationally, reasonably come to the conclusion that Muhammad is truly a prophet.
So you're saying here in front of all these people that a person who looks at the historical evidence for Muhammad and reads that his first interpretation of his revelations was that they were demonic in origin and that he became suicidal and repeatedly tried to hurl himself off a cliff, and that he believed he was the victim of black magic, that a spell had been cast on him later on, that he claimed that he had delivered verses from the devil and then was allowed to take them back. You're saying that someone who looks at this and all kinds of other facts wouldn't rationally conclude that this is obviously a true prophet?
No.
That's it. That's all we needed there, ladies and gentlemen.
Not unless you have a very distorted, you either have a distorted idea of what a prophet is, or you have some distorted information about who Muhammad was, mm-hmm. or a combination of both. Mm-hmm. So and I would say that most people who believe that Muhammad is some type of prophet, whether they're Muslims or whether they're peace-loving, tolerant liberals, mm-hmm. They do have a distorted idea about what a prophet exactly is, or who the true and living God is, and they have distorted information about who Muhammad was, mm-hmm. and what he taught and what he did.
And we are of the view that feelings aren't all that matters here, right?
No.
And part of that is because we want to know the truth, right?
Yes.
I want to know the truth, whether it hurts my feelings or not.
Yes.
And so I'm assuming that there are other people out there who are like me, that they want to know the truth, and that for those sorts of people who want to know the truth, you should be willing to share it with them. And so that's our goal. If you're watching this right now, if you're a Christian, we want you to be better informed. I mean, if you're watching us, you obviously think that there's something on this program that you might be interested in hearing, or that you could learn from. For those of you Muslims out there, and we know you Muslims watch our program because sometimes you call in and sometimes you send me messages saying you're going to kill me or something like that. And then we have very, very nice Muslims like Manu who watch the program. But for those of you out there who are watching, when we tell you about your prophet, it's not because we hate you. It's because we love you enough to tell you the truth. And understand the difference there. When someone criticizes your views, that doesn't have to be out of hatred. It doesn't have to be bigotry. When we tell you that Muhammad is a false prophet, it's because we care enough about you to let you know we don't want you to spend your entire life following the most obvious false prophet in history. And that's what Muhammad is. I can't think of another more obvious false prophet. Can you? Who's more obviously a false prophet than, once all the information is on the table, who's more obviously a false prophet than Muhammad?
What about Saif ibn Sayyid, or maybe Musalama al-Kazab?
These are some of Muhammad.
These are the other guys,
the other guys
who were in Arabia at the same exact time as Muhammad, who were saying that they were messengers of Allah and that they had Qur'an.
Well, how do you know that they were just they weren't better at raising an army, right?
Well, actually,
Musalama, yeah,
he had actually a bigger army than Muhammad. While Muhammad was still alive, it was just after Muhammad died. It was Abu Bakr who was able to raise up an army to defeat him, and Ibn Harb was the one who chopped his head off.
So you're saying these guys are more obvious false prophets? I disagree, man. I disagree. I say, look, you might have won. You might not have convinced as many people. But come on, if we look at these guys, are we going to find they think they're demon-possessed and they're trying to hurl themselves off cliffs and they're getting revelations to justify every weird thing they want to do?
Actually, I don't see a big difference between what they were saying and what he was saying. But
yeah, you had these preachers who are, proclaiming something in the pagan society, something new, and convincing people that they're prophets. But I mean, come on, you got some wild stuff. You got some wild stuff.
Yes, there are some wild things. One of the wildest things to me is Muhammad's understanding of Christianity.
And that's what we're getting here tonight.
Yes.
Because we would expect a true prophet to know what he's talking about, right?
I would think so.
In other words, suppose I claim to be a prophet, right? And I come up to you and I say, "Hey, I'm a prophet," and you say, "Oh yeah, what do you know?" And I start telling you about Islam, but it's all wrong, right? Like I say, "Oh yeah, you see, Islam teaches that Muhammad was an alien, right, who came from one of the moons of Jupiter." You'd start going, what is this guy saying, right? This guy's got it all wrong, right? And suppose then I said, well, if your Muslim sources don't tell you to agree with what I'm saying about Muhammad, then your sources have all been corrupted. There you'd have to wonder what's going on, right? I can't just say a bunch of stuff about Muhammad and then when history refutes me, then I say it's all been corrupt.
But first, before you say that, you have to say, if you don't believe me, go look at the sources of the
absolutely.
Christians. Yeah. Ask the Christians.
There you go. If we want an actual parallel, so you Muslims out there, suppose I came up to you and I started saying, yeah, according to Islam, Muhammad was from one of the moons of Jupiter, and he came down to tell us about ISIS, not ISIS the military group, ISIS the Egyptian deity. And that's what he came to do. And you say, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I say, go to your sources and they will confirm all this, right? Go to your sources, they will support what I'm saying. And then you go out and do it. You actually look, you go to the Quran, you go to the Hadith. This doesn't line up at all. And then my followers say, it's all been corrupted. It's all been corrupted. Would you be persuaded by that? Wouldn't you think it's the most ridiculous thing ever? Wouldn't you think I'm a completely obvious false prophet? That's how we feel, ladies and gentlemen. That's how we feel. Is that not how we feel? Go ahead.
One more.
Oh, you want another parallel? Okay, go ahead.
One more parallel. Don't forget the conversation. I think a caller brought it up in the last show. The debate he had with Abdullah al-Masih and the delegation that came up from Yemen, the Christians. And they debated him, and they went back and forth, and they asked him about, in your revelations, you talk about Isa being the Word. Well, we believe Isa is the Word also, and it says in the first, verse of John.
Some verses are only understood by Allah.
80 verses,
verse 7, yeah.
80 verses come down from Allah, so He can give them an answer. And to sum it all up, the answer was, only people ask these questions who are deviants. So only deviants come and ask me questions like this, and only Allah knows the answer. So there you go.
So if we want the parallel, I would have to say to Muslims a bunch of stuff that obviously has nothing to do with Islam and say that's what Muhammad taught. And then I would have to say, go to your sources. And then when actual Muslims come back with their sources and quoting them to me, I have to come up with a bunch of new revelations saying you're just hard of heart and Allah is the only one who understands certain things, so you guys have all got it wrong. And then eventually I would just have to kill them all, right? I mean, that seems like what we're dealing with here. Again, that's how we feel, my Muslim friends, because Muhammad comes along, and it's fine when he's among pagans talking about Jesus because they don't know any better. They don't know any better, and that's why he was able to get away with a lot of what he said. But Muhammad doesn't know a lot about Jesus except for what he hears. But he says all kinds of things about Jesus, and he says all kinds of things about the gospel because he hears Christians talking about Jesus. He hears Christians talking about the gospel. He seems to assume that he knows what he's talking about. When what he says about them, even though some of it's correct, like he says Jesus performed miracles, but when he gets down to some of the details, it's clear he just has no clue what he's talking about. And eventually it gets pointed out to him, he has no clue what he's talking about, he's getting it completely wrong. And then, well, you know, you guys are the ones with the problem. If you don't agree with me on this, you guys are the ones with the problem. And Allah knows what these verses mean, even though you're using them against me. These Quran verses you're using against me, well, you know, don't twist them because Allah's the only one that knows what they mean. So you can't use them because no one knows what they mean except Allah. And then eventually, well, why don't our sources line up with what Muhammad taught? Been corrupted, right?
It's all been corrupted, and your scholars know that it's been corrupted.
Our scholars know that it's been corrupted.
Your scholars know.
We're going to get to a video clip here in just a moment. We want to take our first caller just so the caller isn't waiting terribly long. Hi, who do we have on the line?
Hello?
Hi.
How are you?
Hi, we're good. We're good. How you doing?
I'm fine. I have a couple of questions that I want to pose to you. How are you doing, CL?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
This is Akil. I spoke to you a few weeks ago.
Oh, my good friend Akil. Yes, I remember speaking to you.
Yes. How are you? We never got a follow-up, so I'm glad I got a chance to talk with you. And how you doing, Mr. Wood?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, I got a couple of questions. I hear you oftentimes ridicule Islam and talk about Islam, but I never really hear you defending the problem that you have as Christians with your own scripture and beliefs. I have a couple of things I want you to clarify for me and for the people. One is about killing. You mentioned about killing in Islam so much as if Islam advocates killing. But in the Bible, you have tons of verses that mentions about killing, mass murder. I can give you several of them. You mentioned about the oppression of women. You have in the Bible the oppression of women, even the rape law, where if a man rapes a woman, he has to give her 50 shekels of silver, and then he takes her home as a wife, and he can't divorce her, according to the Bible. You mentioned also about the Prophet Muhammad and his marriage to Aisha was she was 6 and consummation at 9, and it's so ridiculed. But you have biblical scholars, in fact, mention that the age of Rebecca, when she married Isaac, was 3 years old. And it says that when he married her, he went right into her.
Hey, whoa. Hey, Akil, first, give us the scholars who say, I mean, we know the story of Rebecca, right? The servant gets sent out there. She's coming down to the well, and she's coming out to the well. She's a worker, but you're saying she was 3 years old, according to our scholars. Give us a list of the scholars who say that Rebecca was 3 years old when she's coming out to water animals in the Old Testament. Go ahead, give us the scholars.
3. I say the biblical scholars said she was 3.
What's the scholars?
Okay,
who are the scholars? Who are the scholars? Who? Daniel Wallace, Mike Lacona, Gary Habermas.
I pretty much for you right now. I mean, it's a whole.
Okay, we want the scholars that you're getting from AnsweringChristianity.com, right?
No. This scholar.
All right. We're gonna have to cut this caller because this is just getting plain silly. If you're just gonna go to the worst Islamic website in the world and just say whatever you read off there, we can't take it seriously. Seriously, 3, right? I could understand the first 2, right? Those are important questions, right? We talk about violence in Islam, but what about violence in the Old Testament, right? And you guys talk about the oppression of women in Islam.
But-
What about some of these laws in the Old Testament? Now, what would be the most obvious difficulty here with these issues?
First of all, I think this is a clear example of what we were just talking about. Were we just talking about Muhammad claiming to be a prophet? I'm not saying you're claiming to be a prophet, but I'm saying Muhammad going to people, telling them about Christianity and Judaism as if he knew something about Christianity and Judaism when he knew nothing about Christianity and Judaism. Obviously, he never even looked, he had, for himself, had never seen the sources of Christianity and Judaism. He had heard maybe some Arab tribal mythology somewhere, and he took that as what Jews and Christians actually believe. So when you say something like, your scholars say Rebecca was really 3 years old, did you ever read that account in the Bible for yourself?
No, he read it off a horrible website, and I know because I'm familiar with the claim.
But if you actually read the Bible for yourself, if you read that,
you would know immediately that's false, right? So the servant gets sent to find a bride. He goes, and Rebecca's there. She's walking around helping and doing chores for her household. The idea that she's 3 and is out there, it's just absolute nonsense. So any level of actual studying other than I'm just reading this nonsense off a website. Now, keep in mind, is that what we do with Islam?
No, that is not what we do with.
Is that when we talk about Aisha being 6 years old, when Muhammad marries her, and then 9 years old when he has sex with her, are we just getting some weird information off some horrible website, and we just weren't we just weren't going to?
No, you're looking in Muslim and Bukhari and the rest of the Islamic sources. You're looking at authentic hadith. Akil, are these not in authentic hadith?
Yeah. So what
are we quoting from? We're not quoting from IHateMuslims.com.
Yeah. And so you have that, right? I mean, this is similar to Muhammad in that it's I'll just have no clue what I'm talking about, but I'll say it anyway, and I'll just say it, and because I might catch some ignorant people along the way. But also think about the different kinds of tasks we're about, right? He did not hesitate to spout total, complete nonsense from a website that will say anything, regardless of how ridiculous, against Christianity. And we give people information. Is this off?
I don't. I'm looking and it doesn't look good. The global caster doesn't seem to be working correctly. That's why we need a TriCaster.
What's that?
You have a problem. This is why we need a TriCaster.
Are we broadcasting right now?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I talked to this guy for like an hour, almost an hour on the phone, like almost a month ago. The rape law, where is that at? The supposed rape law?
Yeah, Sam's got a huge article on that. You can Google it. I'm looking at what.
Well, another thing, nobody ever claimed there's no killing in the Bible, but killing doesn't equal.
Yeah, we can clarify all that.
Yeah, this guy, he'll just basically throw whatever he can at you. Yeah.
What's that? Cut what?
Are we back? Yes, we are back.
All right, we're having some technical difficulties. That's actually why the Trinity Channel has been doing a fundraiser. Some of the equipment has been used for many, many years, and some new equipment is needed. We obviously have a topic, but since this is a good time, CL, what are some of the needs we have to prevent problems like this?
Yes, if you were viewing the other show, you would have heard some of me. I was here telling you that the Trinity Channel wants to expand. The Trinity Channel wants to get on new satellites. It wants to do deals with Comcast to be on fiber optic connections. It wants to expand into broadcasting into Europe and into the Middle East. But to do that, we would need new equipment. We need 4 new cameras. We need a device called a TriCaster. The Trinity Channel needs a new storage server to be able to store shows that are done. Also, the Trinity Channel would need to produce more shows, because we can't just keep showing the same shows that we've already produced over and over again. People don't want to see the same thing over and over again. So you have to produce new shows, and that requires money also. So you're talking a large amount of money to be able to expand and to do this ministry that you're seeing here on a wider scale. And I'm basically asking you if you can pray about how can I be of benefit, how can I help, how can I partner with the Trinity Channel. You can help, you can be of benefit, and you can partner with the Trinity Channel. So think about that, pray about that.
All right, we still have some technical difficulties going on. We're going to try and take care of them here during a break. Be back in just a moment here on the Trinity Channel.
The Globecaster, it's been a week, same problem we're having. It's a froze always.
Why don't you get a new one? You should just cancel the show tonight. Nothing I can do.
Nothing like that. You have 5 callers.
Have you been looking for new live shows where you can call in and tell us what's on your mind? Trinity Channel will be airing live shows starring Brother Osama on December 15th through 18th. For more information, visit us at www.trinitychannel.com. And remember, we're looking forward to hearing from viewers like you. The Big Give Week begins December 14th through the 20th, where we can join together to launch the Trinity Channel to Europe and the Middle East through Hotbird Satellite. There will be live shows hosted by Christian apologetic speakers to help spread the gospel to all nations. Together, we can reach this goal through prayer and donations. Remember, this is the Big Give Week. ABN viewers, to watch free reruns of our marathon shows, apologetic shows, and English programs, go to www.youtube.com and type Trinity Channel. Here at ABN, we make it easier for viewers like you to watch programs. For more information, call us at 248-416-1300.
All right, welcome back. We had a technical difficulty due to the Globecaster, which is older than it should be. So we ask you to contribute to getting the, what is it, TriCaster? TriCaster. I don't know what the difference between those things is, but one will apparently not malfunction. So be sure to contribute if you can. All right, now before we had the technical difficulty, we had a caller, and some of the well, none of the criticisms would be legitimate. When we talk about Islam commanding violence, are we saying, is our argument anything that commands violence or has anything to do with violence can't have anything to do with God? No, that's not my claim at all. When we say that Islam commands violent subjugation of unbelievers, we're reporting what Islam teaches, responding to people who say, no, it's all about peace and love and tolerance. If Islam were from God, what the heck? I'd jump on a plane and fly into a building too. So it's not the issue of what it's you have the issue of what it teaches, and then you have the issue of what is true. Now compare that with, but there's violence in the Old Testament. There is violence in the Old Testament, right?
That is correct. There is violence.
You know what you don't find? It's not, hey, go subjugate the entire world. You don't find, go kill a bunch of people because, you know, they have different beliefs. You had examples of violence like against the Canaanites, but it was for some of the most atrocious, it's for, you know, it was for bestiality. It was for, they had child sacrifice, where the greatest thing you could do would be to sacrifice your babies for your deity. And these are the sorts of practices you had. God gives them centuries. He gives them centuries to repent. They don't, and then the land is subjugated. That's compared to, and again, even then, you have a piece of land where these commandments are active. These are commands for a piece of land that's what, about the size of a postage stamp if you get a world map.
And also add into that a piece of land that was supposed to be holy to God. And the Israelites weren't on the land anymore. They were in slavery in Egypt. Now, if they're supposed to just do random jihad-like violence, they could have did that in Egypt and just took the Egyptians' land. No, they leave the Egyptians' land. Then they go into Israel and they remove pagans off of God's holy land.
Yeah, and so, but let's pretend, which it doesn't. Let's pretend the Old Testament commanded the violent subjugation of the entire world. Let's pretend that it commands what Islam commanded. What would that have to do with Christianity, where you see you have Old Covenant, New Covenant, right? In Christianity, you have Old Covenant, New Covenant. Everything our friend said. He's quoting passages which were limited in duration and limited in where they applied, right? The message that's finally meant to be carried around the world is the gospel, where you're told, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, be at peace with all men to the best of your ability. These are the commands that are directed towards us. So why is he comparing that with Islam? In other words, think of it in terms of final marching orders, the final instructions. What are the final instructions sent down to Muslims? Fight those who do not believe in Allah, unless you're in an area where you just can't do that. What are the final marching orders sent down to Christians? Faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
It comes again from not understanding Christianity. You want to disbelieve in Christianity and you want to criticize Christianity, but you don't understand the very thing that it is that you're criticizing. So you don't understand that this land of Israel was a holy land where the Messiah, whom you say you believe in, was supposed to be born in, who was supposed to come to redeem the whole entire world. The final message is about the Messiah redeeming the whole entire world. The final solution offered in the Bible for sin, for Satan corrupting the world, wasn't go and have a holy war against everyone in the world and make them pay a jizya or submit and believe in Judaism.
And so, but I mean, just think about this, because this is what we see all the time from Muslims, right? We're raising some issues, right? We see ISIS chopping people's heads off and killing people, and we say, hey, what's going on there? This is what Islam teaches. So we need to pay attention to that, and we need to address whether Islam is true, because people are going out and killing in the name of this religion, which is false. Therefore, we need to show that it's false. That's what we do, and the response is, what? Well, God, 3,400 years ago commanded the fighting of the Canaanites. What are you even talking about? How desperate can you possibly be if you can't answer a question about Islam, and so you try to deflect when there's no, other than violence is involved, everything else is completely different in the two scenarios. But that's what we get. That's what we get. And why should we be surprised here? But what?
And I was going to offer one more thing. If these two things were actually paralleled, wouldn't it have been that Muhammad would have just went into Najd, the eastern part of Arabia, and cleansed it from the pagans, cleansed the area around the Kaaba from the pagans, and then settled down, and that was it.
And there's another difficulty here. Our friend just really condemned what? The Torah. The Torah, which according to this book, the Quran, is the word of Allah.
That he wrote with his own hand.
Yeah, so this is the word of Allah. Chapter 3, verses 3 and 4 say that God, Allah, revealed the Torah and the gospel. This is so extreme that in Surah 5 of the Quran, you can read it. Read verses 43 to 44. But the Jews came to Muhammad for judgment, to pass judgment. And Allah says, what do they need you for, Muhammad, when they have the Torah? So Allah seems to have nothing but respect for the Torah. In fact, Muhammad himself swore that the Torah presented to him by Jews, and we know that Torah it's the same Torah we have in our Bible today, Muhammad swore that the Torah is from God. And yet our friend not only is willing to attack it, but is also willing to just flat out make stuff up about it, right? That's the level of respect we have. Very different from what we find in Islam. But this is related to our topic, because even though Islam requires belief that the Torah is the Word of God, also requires belief that the Gospel is the Word of God, Islam cannot do that consistently. Why? Because the Torah and the Gospel contradict Islam on basic teachings. And that's actually what we wanted to talk about this evening. I did some interviews with some scholars at a recent conference, and these are world-renowned scholars.
Same scholars who say Rebecca is 3?
Yeah, those are world-renowned scholars who say that Rebecca is 3 after reading about her in the book of Genesis, where she's lifting these massive watering buckets and so on. That's something that 3-year-olds in general do. And our own scholars acknowledge this in Fantasyland, which is where our friend lives. Sorry, but you need to hear that from someone, because this is just silly. But Muhammad doesn't just come along and say, "Hey, I'm a prophet. There are no prophets before me," and so on. He claims to be in line, right? He's one of the prophets who have come. There have been thousands of prophets, with only a few major prophets that we're familiar with. But Muhammad is in the same line with Abraham, Noah, Moses, Jesus, people like this. Muhammad is claiming to be in line with these people. And yet, he just doesn't know much information about what they taught. And in fact, it's the sort of information you would expect to get from just hearing people talking and assuming you know what they're talking about. In other words, let me put it this way. If the Quran were from God, I would expect God to know what Christianity teaches. I would expect God to know what Jesus taught, some basic historical information about Jesus, or the documents that Christians believe in. I would expect Allah to know that. If the Quran is the product of the mind of a 7th century caravan trader, in other words, if this is actually what Muhammad taught, and nothing directly from Allah, then I would expect him to get some things wrong, because he's a 7th century caravan trader. He obviously can't do much research. He can't read. I would expect him to make some errors, and that happens to be exactly what we find, isn't it?
I would say so. We see verses telling us that the Trinity is 3 gods, which consist of Allah, Isa, and Mary.
And Jesus never claims to be the Son of God. And Jesus doesn't die on the cross, so he doesn't rise from the dead. All of the most core basic elements of the gospel are completely different in Islam.
That the gospel really wasn't Jesus coming to die and redeem for people's sins. That's not the good news. The good news was the announcement of a prophet to come by the name of Ahmed.
Yeah, who's going to subjugate Christians and Jews, right? So that's what he's going to do. That's the good news. Hey, you Christians and Jews, Allah's going to send someone to violently subjugate you and take your women captive and things like that. Interesting stuff. All right, well, we have a bunch of callers on the line already, but we haven't gotten very far in our topic, so we wanted to look at a video. And this is just one of the interviews. We'll see, we might get to more. But to introduce this topic, again, Islam affirms that Allah revealed the Torah and the Gospel. And yet, we have a Gospel, and it just doesn't line up with what Islam taught. So according to Muhammad, according to the Quran, Allah revealed the Gospel. According to Muhammad, and according to the Quran, Christians still had the Gospel during his time. They were reading it, because that's what he's appealing to, saying, hey, you can read about me. According to Muhammad and according to the Quran, Christians are supposed to judge by the Gospel. We're commanded to judge by this Gospel. And yet, the gospel that we have, the gospel that we read, which is what we're supposed to do according to Islam, the gospel that we judge by, which is what we're commanded to do by Allah, chapter 5, verse 47, read it for yourself. The gospel that we're commanded to judge by, the only gospel that we have, completely contradicts Islam on basic teachings. According to the gospel we have, Jesus died on the cross for sins. He claimed to be Lord. He rose from the dead. What do we do here? Well, what our Muslim friends tell us is that the gospel is corrupted. Doesn't make any sense because according to the Quran, no one can change Allah's words, and Christians are still commanded to judge by it, so how are we supposed to judge by a corrupt book? So it doesn't make any sense, but let's just assume that we're true. Let's play along here and pretend that the Quran doesn't affirm that no one can change Allah's words, and that the Quran doesn't affirm that Christians have the gospel, that we read the gospel, that we are commanded to judge by the gospel. Let's pretend it doesn't say any of that, and let's pretend that this Islamic view that the gospel was originally inspired by Allah and agreed with Islam, but then it was corrupted into what we have now. Well, Ciel, if we want to take that seriously, we have well over 5,000 Greek manuscripts from all over the place. And these go back to a very early stage. It seems that as we get back earlier and earlier in the manuscript tradition, we should get what? We should get closer to Islam, right?
Yeah, you should start finding all the stuff that Muhammad said would be there if you went and investigated.
So as we get earlier and earlier, we should get to a Jesus who didn't die on the cross. As we get earlier and earlier, we should get to a Jesus who didn't claim to be divine or Son of God or God, anything like that. We should find a Jesus who didn't rise from the dead because he never died. That's what we should find when we go in the manuscript tradition. Well, we say lots of things on here. We say lots of things on this program. But I happen to run into one of the world's leading authorities on New Testament manuscripts, on gospel manuscripts, Dr. Daniel Wallace. He is the executive director of the Center for the Study of New Testament Manuscripts. His organization goes around the world documenting ancient manuscripts. And so if anyone is aware of what's in the manuscript tradition, it would be Dr. Wallace, and he literally wrote the book, more than one, on New Testament Greek. He is an expert in New Testament Greek and in New Testament manuscripts. So if anyone knows what's in the manuscript tradition, that would be Dr. Wallace. And so I went and interviewed him. He normally doesn't talk about Islam, doesn't know a lot about Islam, but I went ahead and asked him, is there anything in the manuscript tradition which supports Islam? And I also interviewed Dr. Habermas and Mike Lacona. But let's go ahead and look at our first video and see what we have. Hi, I'm here with Dr. Daniel Wallace, who is the executive director of the Center for the Study of New Testament Manuscripts. Dr. Wallace, what do you do?
We go around the world and digitize as many Greek New Testament manuscripts as we possibly can. It's a huge task because there's over 2.6 million pages of manuscripts to shoot and about 5,800 manuscripts.
Now, I know this is a little outside your field, but we are going to be talking about New Testament manuscripts, but I wanted to briefly mention Islam because in Islam, the third rightly guided caliph Uthman, there were so many variants that they burned all of the manuscripts to issue an official version, and that seems to be the opposite mindset that you have. You're looking for new manuscripts and variants, right?
That's correct. I think what you have with Uthman versus the early Christians is they regarded, as we do today, anything that's a translation is still the Word of God. Of course, for Islam, it's only the Arabic, but that was an apologetic motion or movement, and with the New Testament, the movement was really evangelistic. Let's get the scriptures translated so more people can come to faith in Jesus Christ.
Now, with Islam, I'd notice it's becoming very common for Muslims to quote people like Bart Ehrman, because Bart Ehrman will refer to all of the New Testament textual variants, and Muslims are hearing this and they're thinking, this supports corruption. This shows that it's been corrupted over time, and they're working a Muslim view into that. They're thinking that there's something in the manuscript tradition that fits with Islam, and the Islamic view of what the original gospel must have been is that Jesus didn't die on the cross, he didn't rise from the dead. He never claimed to be divine, didn't claim to be the Son of God. Is there anything supporting that in the manuscript tradition?
Absolutely not.
So in all, how many manuscripts, Greek manuscripts, are we up to, by the way?
It's 5,839, and then we have about 15 to 20,000 manuscripts of other ancient languages, plus over 1 million quotations by church fathers. We can zero in very, very well on what the original text said.
So really the reason that we have so many textual variants is because we have such a massive manuscript tradition.
Yeah, it's called an embarrassment of riches. We have, if you stacked all those manuscripts and versions up, it would be over 6,600 feet high. The average classical Greek or Roman text, it would be no more than 4 feet high, because there's no more than about 20 manuscripts for most of them.
So in all of the manuscript tradition, we never get away from a Jesus who dies on the cross, rises from the dead, claims to be divine.
Absolutely not. In fact, you get very early manuscripts. Take John 1:1, for example. In all of our manuscripts, in all languages, it says, "In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God." Now, there's a couple of differences in 2 9th century manuscripts that are a little different in Greek, but it's not going to be a difference in translation. That's it. That's a pretty strong verse, and it goes back. We've got it in P66, which is written somewhere between 175 and 200, long time before the Council of Nicaea and before when Muslims typically want to say this is where the deity of Christ was invented.
So can we say, with your expert testimony, that Muslims who believe that as you go back you could eventually get to some gospel that confirms Islam and shows that Christianity was later corrupted, Muslims who believe that are doing so completely against all of the available evidence, and they have to do so completely by faith, and a faith that totally contradicts the evidence we have?
That's exactly right, and Bart Ehrman would agree with me on this. In the paperback edition of his Misquoting Jesus, he was asked, why do you think that the major tenets of Christian orthodoxy have been distorted by the scribes? And he said, I don't believe that. There is not one single essential cardinal doctrine that has been changed by the scribes. That's what Ehrman says. So he's the authority, the source for so many Muslims, but he's not saying what they think he's saying.
So the very source that Muslims are quoting to show that there's something that supports Islam would actually say, no, there's no way this supports Islam.
That's exactly right.
All right, thank you, Dr. Wallace. And you Muslims out there who think there's something that supports you in the manuscript tradition, you might want to think again. Wow. How cool is that, by the way? This is no Joe Schmo, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't get any higher than Daniel Wallace if you're talking about New Testament manuscripts. And so what does he say we have? We have over 5,800. We have over 5,800 Greek New Testament manuscripts. We had, I think he said, 15 to 20,000 manuscripts in other ancient languages. So as he pointed out, Christianity was very evangelistic. They wanted the gospel translated wherever so that people could read it. So it was translated very early on into Coptic and Syriac and Latin, and spread any language that people could speak. Christians wanted to start translating. And then, of course, over 1 million quotations. So people are, church fathers are writing letters and documents and so on, but they're quoting. And wherever you go, right, whether you go to those 5,800 plus Greek manuscripts, whether you go to the 15 to 20,000 early manuscripts in other languages, if you go to the church fathers and the 1 million plus quotations you have, you always get something that agrees with the basic Christian doctrine, Jesus, death, resurrection, and deity. You never get to an Islamic Jesus. Think about that. The Islamic view is there was this original Jesus, and that lines up with Islam, and the Christian view, that was later corrupted. Where's the evidence for this? How was this evidence just completely wiped off the map? How did this evidence disappear? If you want to believe that, my Muslim friends, if you want to believe that evidence can just be completely erased, so that there's just completely a lack of evidence for something, why not say that about Muhammad? Why not say that Muhammad was a guy who came from one of the moons of Jupiter, and he came to preach the Egyptian deity Isis, and if you don't agree with that as a Muslim, it's because it was all changed, it was all corrupted. No, I don't have any evidence for that, but that's what it was. I have no evidence to support one single statement, but all your evidence is wrong, and just believe mine. Doesn't that sound absolutely ridiculous to you? That's what it sounds like to us when you proclaim this Jesus. It completely contradicts every shred of historical evidence we have. CL, what do you think?
Doesn't it also strike you strange, if this is true, that the Christian and Jewish scriptures were corrupted by the Jews and the Christians to the point where they can't be trusted anymore? But if you look through it somehow, you see Match Madam, you kind of look at it, you can find some truth. If that's so important, why doesn't it plainly say that anywhere in the Quran? Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't say that anywhere in the Quran. And don't quote to me Surah 279, because that's not what it means. Mm-hmm. I'll refute you on that.
Yeah, the Quran repeatedly affirms not only inspiration, but preservation and authority of the Jewish and Christian scriptures. And
yes.
So why do they say, you guys got it all wrong, it was corrupted over 6 centuries, you guys messed it up. Instead, it's just still 6 centuries later, and because think about the implication. If, according to the Quran, mm-hmm. chapter 7, verse 157, Christians are still reading the gospel during his time, and we're still commanded, chapter 5, verse 47, to judge by the gospel in Muhammad's time,
yes, we are.
That means that it wasn't corrupted in the 1st century. It was passed on from the 1st century down to the 7th century. Well, if you have a book that's been passed on for all of those centuries, wouldn't you expect some evidence of it somewhere? I mean, people are passing it on one generation to the next, and that means they're copying it. That means it's spread all over the place. That means that Christians know it so well when Muhammad says, hey, judge by the gospel, they must know what he's talking about, right? And so it was all over the place. Christians had the gospel, they knew what it was, they were reading it, they could judge by it, and yet when we go back to the evidence, there is not a shred of evidence. In all our 5,800 plus Greek New Testament manuscripts, those 15 to 20,000 manuscripts in ancient languages, in the million plus quotations, we never find a single bit of evidence supporting this, and it just doesn't seem to bother Muslims. I mean, again, this would be like me saying that real Islam, the real Muhammad, was from one of the moons of Jupiter, and he came to preach the Islamic deity Isis. And why don't I have any evidence for it? Who needs evidence? Evidence, schmevidence, right? And to bring in your point, and not only that, but the true Muhammad from one of the moons of Jupiter, that message was preached for 6 centuries, was spread all over the place. I still don't have a shred of evidence for it, but it was there. Somehow there was a massive conspiracy to cover up all evidence. Do you see how weird that sounds? That's what you guys are telling us about Jesus, and this is just wild stuff, man. This is Islam. Think about it. We're not even talking about the problems with Muhammad. We're talking about Jesus here. And we're talking about historical evidence for Jesus. And if we didn't know anything about Muhammad except what he taught about Jesus and the origins of Christianity and the gospel, we would know that he's a false prophet. We would know this. All right, I understand we have a bunch of callers on the line. We have to take a break in just a couple minutes. Let's try and get one caller before the break. Hi, who do we have on the line?
Wahid.
Wahid, how you doing?
All right. Good evening, Brother David, Brother CL, Edward. God bless you guys, and God bless this station, because it's really opening a lot of sleeping minds, especially on our side, the Christian side. Mm-hmm. I have a comment for that last Muslim caller. I don't think he's a real man because he didn't read the Quran. The women in the Quran, they are sex slaves for their Satan Muhammad. In Surah Al-Ahzab, I don't have the Quran anymore, and I don't really exactly know what it's in English. But in Surah Al-Ahzab, Ayah 49, I believe the page was 300. Let me see. Yep. When I read that ayah, as a man, I couldn't take it. I put my wife, my mom, my sister in that line where Satan Allah tells Muhammad that those women donate themselves for his sexual desires if he wants to sleep with them that night. And he tells them too, don't worry, we told them what we for their husbands, so there will be no excuse on you. There will be no harm comes to you. When I read that, as a man, I couldn't take it. I realized Salman Rushdie's words that it's a satanic, the Quran is a satanic verses. At that time, I grabbed it and threw it in the garbage. So, if you don't mind, I have it in Arabic. Only my wife wrote that ayah before we throw it in the garbage, but it's in Arabic. But if you have it in front of you in English, I would love you to say it in English, but I want to say it to this Arabic guy, Arabic Muslim. So maybe he realized, I pray for him that he will open his mind and realize if he was a real man, realize that Muhammad was the Satan, and his book is Satan. And one more thing too, Brother David, the Satan is a liar. That's why Muhammad, when he used to tell his followers, lie to them. The Quran, the Bible and the Old Testament, the holy book is your encyclopedia. If you have any questions, go to the people before you. Mm-hmm. A few days down the line, he forgets what he told those guys, so he'll change his words. That's why the Quran introduced itself, because it was written by a lying Satan. So, do you mind if I read just this part for this guy? It's just a little part in Arabic. Maybe it will open up his eyes and realize what kind of religion he's believing in. It's a satanic religion.
I could give you about 30, 35 seconds because we have to take a break.
Okay, that's no problem. Over here it says, وَإِمْرَأَ مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِنْ وَهَبَتْ نَفْسَهَا لِلنَّبِي إِنْ أَرَادَ النَّبِي أَنْ يَسْتَنْكِحَهَا خَالِصَةً لَكَ مِنْ دُونِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ قَدْ عَلَّمْنَا مَا فَرَضْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ فِي أَزْوَاجِهِمْ وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَنُهُمْ لِكَيْ لَا يَكُونَ عَلَيْكَ حَرَجٌ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. Read that ayah few more times. Hopefully the Holy Spirit will open your mind and you realize that you are believing in a satanic religion. Your Allah is the Satan himself.
Okay, all right, thank you, brother. And I hate to say this, but the guy who called in, it doesn't sound like he really cares, right? It sounds like his response will be, but in the Bible that the Quran affirms, we see this, and so that it's just a sad situation that people don't seem to care. Lots of Muslims don't seem to care much about defending Islam, seriously. By seriously going through the sources and seeing what it says. All right, we have to take a quick break. We'll be back here in just a moment on the Trinity Channel.
The Big Give Week begins December 14th through the 20th, where we can join together to launch the Trinity Channel to Europe and the Middle East through Hotbird Satellite. There will be live shows hosted by Christian apologetic speakers to help spread the gospel to all nations. Together, we can reach this goal through prayer and donations. Remember, this is the Big Give Week. Have you been looking for new live shows where you can call in and tell us what's on your mind? Trinity Channel will be airing live shows starring Brother Osama on December 15th through 18th. For more information, visit us at www.trinitychannel.com. And remember, we're looking forward to hearing from viewers like you.
If you'd like to support ABN's ministry, you can give us a call at 248-416-1300, or you can visit our website at www.abnsat.com. ABN appreciates your support and donations.
Welcome back to the Trinity Channel. We've been talking. We want to get to our callers because we have a bunch of callers waiting. The topic we've been addressing is Islam is just Muhammad is just completely refuted by history, and we're only talking about the Islamic view of Jesus. Muhammad said things about Jesus, and we're not completely in the dark. We have a lot of ancient writings on Jesus. We have writings from his followers. We have writings from the followers of his followers. We have an unbroken chain going back to Jesus' own followers, therefore to the words of his mouth, and yet it completely contradicts Islam. It completely contradicts Islam on fundamental doctrines. And so what we're required to do in Islam is say, if we wanted to be a Muslim, and we were aware of the information that Dr. Wallace shared, namely, nowhere in the manuscript tradition do we ever find an Islamic picture of Jesus. If we are aware of that and we want to be Muslims, we have to say, even though every shred of evidence we have, every shred of available evidence in the world tells us clearly and indisputably that the Islamic view of Jesus is wrong, we're going to believe it anyway. And that is rough, man. That's rough when you have to say, every shred of evidence tells me I'm wrong, I'm going to believe it anyway. That's what being a good Muslim's about.
Well, what I think it is, I think it's what you're saying, but it's the opposite way. It's before we even look at the evidence, before we even talk about it, it's true. Muhammad is a prophet. I've decided it. I believe it. That's what I'm supposed to believe, and that's what I will believe. Okay, now let me see your evidence.
Yeah, and I'm going to reject it. I'm going to reject every bit of evidence that you could ever present. And you could get the world's greatest scholars in the room to tell me that they are aware of all the evidence in the world, and it wouldn't matter because I already know that Muhammad is a prophet. So again, I mean, this is the point here is no matter where we look, Muhammad turns out to be a false prophet, right? No matter where we look. I'm just to compare, if someone came along and started saying all sorts of weird things about Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, someone we can examine historically, and all this person's claims turn out to be false, what he's saying about George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or something like that, if all the person's claims that we can go out and investigate just turn out to be wrong, and there's not a shred of evidence anywhere, and the evidence we do have says it's completely wrong, why would you believe him? It would seem you would need some very good evidence, right? In other words, if Muhammad's coming along and he's saying these things that just totally contradict all our available evidence, if that's the situation, it seems we would have to have some very, very good evidence that he's a prophet in order to believe in him, but we just don't have that. We don't have it anywhere. No matter, the deeper we dig, the more evidence we find that this guy is a false prophet, and yet you Muslims will continue to believe in him.
And also,
rough stuff, man.
Even when you look at the claims that he makes in the Quran and the Sunnah concerning about what Christians and Jews believe, especially about Christians, when you go back in history to try to look to see is there anything that matches what he's saying, the closest thing I could see is certain things from the Gnostics, right? But
even though, I mean, think about
that. It's not even a perfect match with that.
And Muslims can never agree with the Gnostics, right? That Jesus is some sort of emanation from the deity, and some of them didn't even have a real body, but he's not a normal human being, not a normal prophet, and yet you're right. That's the closest you can get, and there's nowhere anywhere in history where you find an Islamic Jesus, and yet you will still believe that the real Jesus was an Islamic Jesus. And not only that, you believe that there was an original Islamic Jesus, and then every shred of evidence of his existence was totally corrupted. And then Allah comes along, sends Muhammad, and affirms our scriptures, the very scriptures that present a non-Islamic Jesus, tells us to believe and judge by those scriptures. And Allah isn't even aware of the fact that the gospel has been corrupted, right? Allah has no clue. In other words, you Muslims who say the gospel has been corrupted, your God has no clue about that. You know more than your God. That's what you're telling me. And so it's just very important. You think you're serving God. You think you're obeying God by believing the Islamic view of Jesus. You need to understand you are massively insulting and degrading God when you tell me that you know more than your God knows. If you Muslims, like the guy who called in, right? If he knows more, and this guy doesn't know anything, right? If he knows more than his God, what's that tell me about his God? This is wild stuff.
There can only be one possibility. Those scriptures really did exist. The leaders of the Jews and Christians wanted to get rid of the truth about Jesus not being crucified and the truth about Ahmed being predicted and he being a medium brown man and all the whole thing. They wanted to get rid of it so bad that they wiped out every shred of evidence from the face of the earth that said any of what Muhammad said.
And they would have to be omnipotent if they were going to do that, right? I mean, think about that. See, in Islam, you actually had a situation where there could be complete corruption, right? Uthman gathered all the manuscripts together. He had the sword, right? If you disagree, he could chop your head off. So he has all the manuscripts. He can do whatever he wants. Now, I believe that Uthman, was basically faithful, not perfect, but he tried to put out an accurate Quran. The point is, there's nothing like that in Christianity, right? The Gospels originally spread across Northern Africa, across Europe, across the Middle East, as individual books, right? So Matthew is put out as a gospel, that spreads. Mark is put out as a book, it spreads. Luke is put out as a book, it spreads. Paul writes a letter, it spreads, right? Eventually these things are compiled, but they spread all over the place, and they not only spread, they are translated. As they go, they are translated into other languages. Well, guess what? We have those documents. We have a very rich tradition of those documents. Nothing there supports Islam. Nothing. Why isn't there something? Why isn't there one little fragment somewhere that agrees with you? In order to corrupt everything, everywhere, you'd have to be more powerful than anyone could be, because there is no central authority in Christianity that could do that then, right?
Right. And why didn't they get rid of all the other if they're going to get rid of conflicting texts, texts that may conflict with each other, that may say one thing and may say, there should be nothing. There should never be anything that could possibly conflict, any documents. It should just have been what we ended up under Abu Bakr and Uthman. One unified, agreed upon Quran in the Qurayshi dialect.
Why have all these texts when they could have just pulled an Uthman, burned everything else? And if you don't know what we're talking about, look up the video on YouTube, the original Burn the Quran Day. It's not about people today burning Qurans, it's about Uthman burning all Quran manuscripts. There is no Uthman in Christianity. I don't mean the name, I mean no one in that position to universally do what he wants with the Bible. There's nothing like that. So when you say all of the evidence is against you, that's evidence that was in multiple different hands, that no one ever had power to universally change it. And so you Muslims, you have to believe that there's some sort of divine corruption of all available manuscripts.
Conspiracy
theory. Massive conspiracy. And then, again, Allah doesn't know about the conspiracy, because he should have, if that was the situation, Allah should have come along and said, it's all been corrupted, don't trust it. Instead he says, yes, it's inspired, it's been preserved, and make sure you Christians judge by what you have.
And wouldn't the first people to bring this evidence of this up be the atheists and the liberals? Wouldn't they be on board to bring us this original Bible with the original non-crucified Jesus? But even they wouldn't agree with Muhammad. Even they wouldn't collaborate with Muhammad.
You know what's really awesome? That Christians believe certain things about Jesus and Muslims believe certain things about Jesus. But no matter how far back we go, all we find is the Christian view of Jesus. Right? Isn't that good to know? Isn't that good to know? Would it be horrifying to go back and find out, the earliest documents, they say that Jesus didn't die on the cross, or didn't rise from the dead, or didn't claim to be Lord? It would be horrifying for me to learn that there is a tremendous amount of evidence against the Christian view. And that's just not what we find. The earlier back we go, the more we find that agrees with us. But that's the exact opposite of what you have in Islam. No matter where you go, your view of Jesus is completely refuted, and you don't seem to care about that. Oh, this is interesting stuff. All right, well, we only have about 15 minutes left. We have several callers. I had a lot more videos. We'll have to watch those on a future program. Other scholars I went to and asked them something about Jesus with the historical evidence, and then asked them something about Islam. But we don't want to leave our callers. So let's get to our next caller. Hi, who do we have on the line?
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, this is Floyd. Can you hear me okay?
Can you turn our mic up a little bit? I'm having trouble hearing.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit. So speak carefully.
Okay, I have several quick comments. Number one, the problem of distortion of history is not limited to Islam. When I went to college and went through history classes, they had difficulty accepting the Bible as a historical document, as a primary document, and yet when you look at the Bible, it's always deals with history. So many years and so begot so such and such a thing happened at such and such a date and so on. So revisionism of history is always accomplished because they want to change history so they can enforce their own viewpoint. They want to claim that evolution is true, for example. Islam wants to destroy the truth of the Bible as real history so that they can bring in their history. If I'm not mistaken, Muhammad was raised by his uncle.
Hi, brother, you're breaking up. I don't know if you're talking on a cell phone, but if you could call back on a landline, I don't know if it's just me. Could you under?
Yeah, it was hard. I got some of it.
I got some of it, but not really enough to respond. So I'm sorry. Please call again. But I'm just again, I don't know if it's me, but I couldn't really make out all of what you're saying. So sorry about that. And let's go to our next caller and let's see what the connection's like. Hi, who do we have on the line?
Hello, my name is Corey.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm not even sure. I'm on a phone right now. I can't even get you guys with the distortion on the TV, so I don't know if it's me or not.
Oh yeah, we hear you and you're live. Don't listen to the TV because there's a few second delay. So if you could turn the TV off or whatever and just listen to us over the phone.
Yeah, I can't. Well, it doesn't matter. I can't even see you guys. Really,
okay.
I just know you're on. My name is Coy. I'm from Detroit, Michigan.
Oh, cool.
And I do a lot of ministering to the Muslims.
Yeah.
In Detroit. And when my pastor of my church found out about it, he sent me out to Hamtramck, which is insanely Muslim, which is fine. And I'm running into a lot of problems. I wondered if I could get some feedback from you guys. A lot of the problems I'm dealing with are I need to know what or where do Muslims get their information. They have that Jesus wasn't crucified and Judas was in his place. Mm-hmm. That's the first one. The second one is, do Muslims base their knowledge on that Jesus is not the Son of God and wasn't resurrected from the dead? I need to know where they get that information from and and have the biblical manuscripts been corrupted, because I hear that a lot.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, thank you. And just so you know, go to my website, answeringmuslims.com. Answeringmuslims.com. We have the information of where we're debating, since you're in the Detroit area, and we're debating in Westland. So that's not far from you. You can come out and you'll hear both sides of a debate, of two debates actually. So that's this Saturday. But as for your questions, you ask where Muslims are getting their information. Well, it comes. Well, if you're talking about a specific Muslim, like a Muslim you meet on the street, that doesn't necessarily have to come from the Quran. He hears it from his leaders or his debaters or his scholars or his friends or his family that Jesus didn't die by crucifixion and so on. But these things ultimately go back to the Quran. So it's chapter 4, verse 157 of the Quran, which says that Jesus wasn't crucified. The Jews thought they crucified him, but it was just made to appear to them that way. This doesn't talk about Judas being put in his place. That's a common Muslim view nowadays. But according to Muhammad, our earliest records show that Muhammad advocated some sort of substitution theory, that Allah disguised someone, made him look like Jesus, and that this other person was crucified in his place. One of the things you'll want to point out, if you're talking to a Muslim who says that, is according to that view, Christians believe Jesus died by crucifixion because Allah deceived them. So when you have a Muslim who's saying Judas was crucified in Jesus' place and that Allah disguised him and so on, that Muslim is telling you that the reason, and think about this, because that's in the gospel, right? Mm-hmm. That's in the gospel. So think about how this relates. Daniel Wallace pointed out that wherever you go, any of the manuscripts you go to, they say that Jesus died by crucifixion, right? They affirm the core Christian doctrines. Well, if you want to take the Muslim view, why is that? Why does all the available evidence confirm the Christian view? Because Allah did a great job tricking everyone, right?
Yeah, actually you could say it was his greatest act of scheming. Mm-hmm. He wanted to prove to the Jews and maybe the Romans that they couldn't out-scheme him. Mm-hmm. And he actually says in Surah 3:54 that he can out-scheme, he's a better schemer than they are. Mm-hmm. So
the root word there is makar, which means deception. So it's the sort of scheming that involves deceiving people. And as a Muslim, you would have to believe this is what Allah did. He tricked all these Christians and all these other people and all these scholars into believing that Jesus died when he actually didn't. So the reason this is important is Muslims, this is our topic, Muslims want to say that the gospel has been corrupted. Who did the corrupting in this case?
Allah.
It's Allah. Allah is doing the corrupting. Do you not see the problem with this, my Muslim friends? That you can't just blame the Apostle Paul or the Council of Nicaea or anything like that on the issue of crucifixion, because that's something Allah did. So when we talk about this, it would require something divine to do all of this corruption. Muslims actually have to believe. They haven't thought about that. So when you called in and say, hey, you see Muslims who say that Judas was put in his place and so on, they haven't thought through this. They're just thinking, oh, that's much better that Judas gets crucified than Jesus. It's so much better. Think about the implications that God started Christianity by deceiving people into believing that Jesus died on the cross when he actually didn't. It was Judas. And that the reason all evidence says that is because God tricked so many people. He tricked people across the board. You see the problem with that?
Yeah, exactly. If I was an eyewitness during this incident, and I wasn't one of the disciples who knew about the trick going on, because it says some disciples knew, but it doesn't name which ones knew and which ones. But if I was just an eyewitness and I wanted to just record what I saw, well, I would have saw someone who looked exactly like Jesus being nailed to the cross, because Allah made that person. I didn't know Allah made the person look like Jesus. I just would have saw somebody. I would just saw Jesus on the cross.
Yeah, and so think about that. We were pointing out that Islam requires you to believe the opposite of what every shred of evidence tells you. But it also, as CL just pointed out, you could be seeing it with your own eyes, and Islam can be telling you, deny what you are seeing in front of your face and believe the opposite. Believe that God is just tricking you into thinking you see this. If you believe in that kind of God, you could be sitting there watching something and you don't know if Allah is just tricking you. How do you know what to believe? How do you know Allah is not tricking you right now? That maybe we don't even exist. Allah is just making you think that we exist because He wants to trick you into believing something. How do you know? Once you have an omnipotent deceiver in your theology, you have got some serious problems. And this is what Islam does, right? But believe the opposite of all history. Believe the opposite of what your senses are telling you right in front of your face, because you don't know if Allah is just tricking you. This is some wild stuff, and you Muslims how can you tell us anything? How can you tell us anything about why we should believe in Islam? You don't know if Allah is tricking you. All right, we only have a couple minutes left. We have two callers. Let's try and get to both of them. We're going to have to take them quickly. We have Richard on the line. Richard? Hi, Richard, are you there? We got Richard?
This is Mark.
Oh, hey, Mark. All right, we'll take you. You were next in line, but we'll take you. What's up?
Just one quick comment. Where is all the musical? I'm a Christian artist from North Carolina, singer-songwriter. Where is all the musical evidence for Muhammad? You know, once the disciples left the upper room, they left singing. And look at the hundreds of thousands of songs that's been written about Christ, our Savior. I want to encourage ABN, David, CL, but where is all the musical evidence? You know, for even the existence of Muhammad. I think it was a fiction, just a fabrication of somebody's mind. That's just my comment. But where is the musical evidence for Muhammad? And you know, it just don't. Allah's not sweet in any song and none of that. But my comment is just look, where is not only the historical evidence for solidification of the belief of Christianity, but where is any musical evidence? Me being naturally a musician would like to compliment on that. And plus, I really appreciate your station and hope we open the eyes of the Muslims to a Lord that loves them like they are and that can help them change. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, brother. And the question, where's the musical evidence for Muhammad? I've never heard that one either. But it would be along the same lines of where is the the artistic or something like that, the artistic evidence for Muhammad. In other words, Jesus inspired a lot in the arts, right? So there was tons of paintings of Jesus and all things Christian, and lots of music. Some of the most amazing songs of all time were about Jesus. A Muslim would respond that it's kind of unfair because music isn't exactly music, and pictures of Muhammad would be music about Muhammad, but music in general wouldn't be that'd be a problem, right? I mean, all kinds of instruments are from Satan.
Yeah, but I mean, we know historically, and even in the Bible, that Christians, believers, starting from the first century, were making hymns and songs about Jesus. You know, all through this first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 centuries until Muhammad gets there, people are singing songs and hymns about Jesus. So wouldn't somebody have made a song? Because maybe instruments are haram in Islam, but singing itself, a cappella singing, just an a cappella song about Jesus really didn't die on a cross or something. I don't know. Anything.
Yeah. So we have a couple. We have a couple of issues, right? So we have Jesus, right? We have not only the manuscript tradition and the historical evidence and so on. We have the tradition of the arts that led to. Nothing agrees with Islam. You have the situation in Islam where with Muhammad and if Muhammad is in line with these earlier prophets and so on, why wouldn't we expect to find the same thing? I mean, if you look back to King David and that music tradition there, if Muhammad's in the same line with these guys, you should see it, but you just don't. I'm not sure that's a tremendously important argument, but there's something that's just out of whack in every way about Muhammad that's totally inconsistent with the previous revelations. All right, we only have 2 minutes left. Did we have Richard back on the line?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, it's kind of a follow-up from the first caller. I had 1 Samuel 15:3 in mind, where God tells the Jews to kill even infants and children because no matter how vile the adults were, they're still children. And as a Christian, I admit this is something that I struggle with. So, what do you think of that?
Well, that is a very tough call, and there would be some differences of opinion as to what this is involving. Paul Copan has written a book, "Is God a Moral Monster?" where he goes into some of these passages and looks at them from a historical perspective and what that would have actually involved at the time and what sorts of things were figures of speech and aren't exactly how we would take them literally and so on. Just going with the straightforward literal interpretation, the Christian response is at the end of the day, God, as the ultimate author of life, gets to do what he wants. That's why my objection to Islam is not, it's violent. My objection to Islam is that it's false. So if that verse means exactly what it says, there are no figures of speech, it means what, exactly what it sounds like to our modern ears, then the response would be, if God wants to annihilate us right now, God has that right. If God wants to flood the world and wipe out, men, women, children, God has that right. If God wants to take our breath away right now, He can do that. In fact, you might wonder why He doesn't, right? Why doesn't, if given the sort of things we do, why would God put up with us so long? But biblically, God puts up with people, puts up with people, puts up with people, puts up with people, and then says, enough is enough. But the real difference in between Christianity and Islam is, whatever you have that was a specific command for a specific time at a specific instant, that's not a blanket command. That's not a command, hey, just go around killing people. We are commanded, love everyone, love our neighbors, love our enemies. And so the final, again, we got back to final marching orders. This is what we're commanded. Not God ordered something, 3,400 years ago to do something that we today regard as violent. Whereas in Islam, the command is still fight those who do not believe in Allah. So again, that's not my reason for rejecting Islam. My reason for rejecting Islam is Muhammad's a false prophet. We've given you one of the reasons tonight for believing that Muhammad's a false prophet. Namely, when he says something about history, we find out that it's totally false. We've got plenty more coming up in the following days here on the Trinity Channel. That's not a complete answer to your question. We actually did a show, Sam Shamoun and I, on Old Testament violence, so you can watch them much more thorough. Can't really do it justice on the last minute or so of a program. But we'll see you next time, and we have a lot more here on the Trinity Channel.